Hello and good evening, everyone, to a very special Sunday edition of Generally Irritable. I'm really excited this evening to have on our guest, Juan Coleman, who is running for a school board seat in Essex, Vermont. This episode, I'm really excited to have Juan on, especially because we've really seen a resurgence of parents getting involved in what's going on in their children's school. And I just absolutely love to see it. I love to see all the engagement with the school boards. I love to see all the conversation. I have family in education, and I know a ton of people who are educators, whether it's teachers, administrators, aides, folks who help kids with school assessments and learning disabilities and things like that. I have a bunch of accounting clients that work in that field. And what I've heard over and over and over again is how important it is that parents be involved and prioritize their child's education, especially primary school and high school. This is one of the key indicators for success. The schools where we see low test scores and low performance generally, the teachers will tell you that the kids' parents are not involved. They're not coming to school board meetings. They're not showing up to parent teacher conferences. And so if we want to take seriously in this country education, and we want to take seriously the promise of the American dream, that there is upward mobility no matter where you come from, no matter what your life circumstances are, this question, this situation, this issue, primary schooling, is so important to accomplishing that goal and making the American dream a reality. And so whenever I hear about somebody running for school board, participating in school board, starting new clubs or programs in the schools, I especially love to hear about it. And I was really intrigued when I met Juan. We actually met when I announced my campaign at Ignite Church, and he came up and chatted with me after, and I just immediately could tell his energy and his passion for young people. I could see that there was a real desire in his heart to make sure that these kids have a good education, and that they're not lied to and told that they can't make it, and that they are victims somehow, and that that they'll never overcome. I could see how that preaching that we hear from our schools a lot now, he just was not okay with that. And so I just got really excited. And so without further blah, blah, blahs from me, let me introduce Mr. Juan Coleman. Hello, Juan. Welcome to the program.
Hey, thank you for having me. Thank you for having me.
Yes. This is so exciting. Okay, so I'm going to ask you a couple of clarifying questions as we get started. And just as a reminder to all of our viewers, whatever platform you're watching on, YouTube, Facebook, or Twitch, you can put questions in the chat for me or for Juan. If there's anything you want us to make sure we cover and bring up, any news that you think you want to talk about, any questions for the candidate for School Board of Essex, put them in your chat and we'll read them and we'll ask. Let's see. We already have a comment. Medic Knight says, "Ladies and gents, the next president of the United States, Erica Reddick." That is funny. The show used to be called Reddick for President.
Right.
And then everybody got really confused and they were like, "Wait, are you running for president?" And I was like, "No, it's a joke." Anyway, okay, so you're running for school board in Essex.
Yes, Essex, the Essex Westford, EWSD, Essex Westford School District.
Okay, so is that different than like Essex Junction, Essex Town? Explain for our viewers how they work.
Yes, so the town and the junction are separate. So right now what's going on is I'm actually running for the village seat, the junction / the village. I'm running for the village seat in Essex Junction.
Got it. Okay, so there's like So there's like crossover seats,
Yeah, so
or there's like a
you have
specific seat for specific parts of town.
yes, so you have seats designated for Westford because it's a combined school district for those that reside in Westford,
Okay.
Vermont. So it's EWSD, Essex Westford School District. And then you have seats comprised in the village, which is the junction, Essex Junction, the village, otherwise known as the village. And then you have the town, which is allocated seats as well for the school.
Okay, but you guys are all on the same school board. It's
Yeah,
just that that's the seat that you're running for.
yes, yes,
Okay.
that's the particular seat that I'm running for.
So can you help our viewers understand if they're in Essex, whether or not they can vote for you? Is there like parameters on the map that they
I
would
mean,
know if
it's pretty self-explanatory. I mean, the city, they have their zoning maps. Most people that live here, they're aware of whether or not they're in the village or the town.
okay.
And if not, I encourage them to contact the town clerk's office here in
Okay.
Essex and get that information
Make sure they know what ward they're in. All
if
right.
they have questions.
Okay, I wonder if we can add that Essex town clerk contact, just because it's funny, there's so many people, Juan, as I've started to get involved in politics, and the more I go about it, there's a lot of people who are just sort of getting tuned into politics. It's like things, and we don't normally think about the school board being political, but here in Vermont, they're very political. There's very hot button topics and conversations coming up. Are you meeting a lot of people as you're knocking on doors and going around the town that, are just kind of starting to get involved or just starting to pay attention? What kinds of things are you hearing from people as you knock on doors?
Well, first and foremost, I'm not the only one that's actually been knocking on doors. So I've had a team of people comprised to help me out, and I just want to take this time to publicly acknowledge them and to thank them for their
Mm,
support, their efforts, and their prayers. But one thing, most of the things that because even whether it be myself or anyone else, when we do go out.
yeah.
It's actually a unique blend, Erica. Some people are in the know of what's going on, and some are they have absolutely no idea. That could be for a multitude of reasons. Some people currently have kids in the school system. Some
Mm,
have kids that have gone through it, 15, 20 years ago. They're grown now. They've moved on. It just depends. But yeah, I'm finding more people who it seems like you realize when you make that personal connection with somebody, you're on their doorstep and you see them walking down the street,
mm,
just to take that time, 5 to 10 minutes. I've had some great conversations with individuals just in passing that had no idea. And what's interesting though is I've had people also be like, "Hey, are you Juan Coleman?" Because my signs are,
mm.
and they're
Yep.
like, "Hey, I like your website and that type of stuff." So it's good to get that feedback as well.
Excellent. One of the things that's funny, and after this, we'll kind of back up and get a little bit of your background and what has you so passionate about running for school board. But I wonder, there is this conception that I think a lot of people have when they run for office, that because of the way people speak to each other online, right? So because of how nasty people are in
Yes.
like Facebook and on Front Porch Forum or whatever, that translates into real life. And I know for me, I've never had anybody actually be ugly to me in person to my face. I've had plenty of people say nasty stuff online, but I've never actually had anybody who's recognized me or come up to me and been nasty. Has that been your experience as well?
For me, definitely, it's really interesting. So what I will say is this to add to that, Erica, is that people definitely they don't keep that same energy on person that they do online. But even if you hop off of an actual like comment thread
Yeah,
and just DM or text, people's energy is completely different.
totally different.
So there's that middle ground right there before you even get to, and you know, what are the chances that you're going to really run into somebody, even in a small town? Who knows, right? But run into somebody in person. But I'm gonna tell you right now, people keep a different energy even when you just message off the threads, and you
And
can actually have a decent conversation without other people getting involved and, reacting in a certain way and all of this other stuff. It's a lot different. It's
absolutely. And I think there's a lot of people who are afraid to either run for office or volunteer for office because they're afraid of what people are going to say, or that it's going to be, that they're going to have some bad thing happen to them. And what I tell people is, there's a lot of people who are willing to say nasty, mean things to you online, but they're not going to do it to your face. And so,
no,
if my conscience, this is what I tell people, if my contribution to protecting our constitutional rights, to protecting my country, means all I have to do is deal with people calling me names, I feel like I can handle that. Given that there are soldiers out there who are literally taking bullets and dying and losing limbs, and all I have to do is get called names. That is a burden I'm willing to bear for my country.
definitely. Yeah.
And I wanted to use that to transition into your background. So now I know you're not really allowed to talk about, for certain things we're not supposed to talk about really online, but you do have a history of serving your country. So
Yeah. Yeah.
say whatever you're allowed to say
Right.
about your service and your background, and what made you decide to run for school board this year.
Okay, so service wise, I mean, do you want me to start like childhood and work my way up, or where do you want me to start? Because I can.
It's why don't you give us the 2-minute version of little Juan Coleman making it to being a man in uniform?
Okay, perfect. So I grew up in Wilson, North Carolina. I attended public schools there. Uh, then I attended a private school there, a great private school called Greenfield Academy.
Hmm.
And then after that, I ended up going to a military boarding school in Fort Union, Virginia, known as Fort Union Military Academy, for 4 years.
Hmm.
All male boarding military school.
Wow.
Great place. And quite frankly, if I could do it all over again, I wasn't a fan at first, but if I could do it all over again, I most certainly would. And then it was from there, I actually liked the military structure. So I was like, this is cool. So I started looking at other schools. I looked at the Citadel for college. And then my government professor at the time at Fort Union Military Academy, Captain Van Moorkirk, he actually said, hey, there's a hidden gem in Vermont. I'm like, what are you talking about? I never even heard of Vermont, right? And he
Okay.
said, go ahead.
Well, that's why I was like, okay, because I read your bio and I'm like, how did this guy end up from
Right,
freaking military school in Virginia to Norwich, Vermont? This is
right,
crazy.
right. And he's like, hey, it's this hidden gem. And he's like, Norwich University. I'm like, okay. Came up, toured it with my mom and my aunt. We liked it. So I chose to enroll at Norwich University, and from '02 to '06 majored in political science and English. Graduated in '06 after coming back home for a couple of years and trying to, get involved with law enforcement and get on with
Mm.
some federal agencies. Didn't necessarily work out. And then here we are. I decided to join the Vermont Air National Guard after moving back up to Vermont in 2008-9 timeframe. So,
Cool.
and I've been in the Vermont Air National Guard ever since, and I'm currently a flight chief. And the Vermont Air National Guard is a great experience. I'm not
Awesome.
scared to talk about my unit, but there's certain things I'm not going to get into. But
Right.
I'm very proud to be a part of my unit, and we do great things, not just here,
Yes.
around the world. So I'm humbled, and I'm proud to call myself a Green Mountain boy. So
Yeah. I love it. You know, I might dive in a little bit. Roger, I want you to know I see your question. We're gonna warm Juan up a little bit with the hard questions as we get started. So I'm actually gonna ask you a hard question. So hopefully, and whatever answer you have is correct. So don't, this is all just for our viewers to get to know you and kind of get to see how you think and how you will serve as a school board member. So it's interesting to me that you were recommended to come here from Virginia, And, we hear all the time from folks that Vermont is this racist state and it's white supremacist. And you can't make it if you're black or, whatever. And I'm curious what your experience was like moving to, one of the whitest states in the union and being a part of the Green Mountain Boys and your experience with that. Like, have you found that Vermonters are a bunch of racists? What kind of things have you dealt with, if you have? And what do you think people should know about this conversation?
Right. So one of the things is I think before we get in, when people talk about things like racism, it depends on how you look at it.
Mm,
Right. Like I don't look at somebody calling me the N-word as them being racist. I look,
really?
I look at racism more from an economic standpoint. And now somebody can do that and they can be, a bigot or prejudiced and have discrimination, but racism, when you really, really study it at its core, it's more of an economic issue. And this is
Interesting.
something that, and so what I mean by that is racism, the way that I personally view it, and some others that I've spoken to over the years, is when you keep an African American from being in positions to compete for wealth, power, and resources in this country. Okay. So if you
Yeah.
call me whatever, you can call me whatever, but what power do you have over me? Are you controlling my income? Are you controlling where I sleep at night? Can you keep me from going online and educating myself, or from going to the local library and getting a stack of books this high and reading and continuing to educate myself? If you can't do those things, then, I'm not going to necessarily say you're racist. Now, what I will say is what's interesting is growing up in the South and being here, I've experienced some things here that I would say are, discriminatory or bigoted, and those things. That stuff's
Yeah.
everywhere, though. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
everywhere. But it's, you know when I hear stories of my granddad and my ancestors and other people, to include white people who were heavily involved in making sure blacks weren't mistreated. So it's not just black people that were in that plight, right?
Yeah.
It's not just black people now. So when I hear those stories and I understand these things, it shifts from, okay, what's my mentality gonna be? Okay, like what's my mindset gonna be like?
Yeah.
Because you're gonna deal with something everywhere you go. There's gonna be something, and there are things, quite frankly, that aren't going to go away.
Mm.
It's just not. So it's not so much for me what the fight is. It's looking at how you're going to fight those things, and I
Mm.
mentality that I'm not going to be stopped. That if things get in my way, I'm gonna find a way to go through it and to get over it, to get past it.
That's what I'm talking about. See, that's what, to me, and maybe this is just the way that I was raised. Maybe you can relate to this. But when somebody tells me no, that I can't do something, or, because I've dealt with discrimination as a woman, I've dealt with discrimination as a Christian, as a conservative, right? I've dealt with things. A lot of my viewers know, I have a criminal record. I had housing issues. The only places I could get an apartment in Austin were in really bad areas where literally you're hearing gunshots at night, right? So, like, I've dealt with these things, but that just kind of spurs something in me, or sparks something in me that makes me want to fight back. Do you know what I mean? It's like, if you're going to
Or
tell me, no, I can't do something, first of all, I'm going to show you why I can. And I'm going to show you why you're wrong. I'm going to prove you wrong. I have that sort of mentality. Do you think that that's something that's instilled in you? Or do you think that that's like an innate human trait? What do you think that is?
I think it's a blend of both. And what I mean by that is instilled. I think I would go more along the lines of it being instilled from the standpoint of you may be put in situations where other people can identify this in you, like mentors and and teachers and all these people that play a role in grooming us and help mold and shape us into adults, right? So
Yeah.
you get put in these situations, but I do believe that we have God-given gifts as well. And
Yeah.
so it's just a matter of not only understanding your potential, but also being able to access it.
Mm, absolutely. That's why it's so important that we have people willing to pour into the next generation, be
Yes.
mentors, and ensure that the curriculum that they're getting and the life lessons that they're getting are really meaningful and empowering, not disempowering and creating learned helplessness in whole generations of young people.
Yes. Yes.
So Ray says, Juan, thanks for serving. So
Thank you.
you're already
Thank
getting
you.
big kudos out here from folks.
Thanks, Ray.
Uh, okay, so Roger asked, Juan, are you opposed to sexually explicit books available in the libraries of your public school? So I'm wondering, I know there was a big deal several months ago with some books. I'm trying to remember, was it called like Gender Queer and some other ones that had like images of sexual acts with
Right.
children
Right.
in it? Do you know what he's talking about?
To an extent, and I've spoken about this in a recent student forum. I don't support that.
Mhm.
Um, I think we have to be very careful with the minds of children. And, there are certain things that are deemed developmentally appropriate. So, for example, you still
Yeah.
have movies that have ratings because it has been deemed that kids of certain ages should not see this type of material. Now, if they happen to get their hands on it later, then, whatever, but it doesn't mean that we're going to enable that,
Right.
if that makes any sense. So,
It does.
uh, books with sexually explicit images and things of that nature in school, I don't, no, I'm not in favor of that. And I've,
That
I've I've been outspoken about that and very consistent with my messaging there. No, that is not something, because once you open a certain door, I feel like there's no line and things will just keep going and going and going and going, and then
Yeah.
where does it end? So
Well, and that's one of the things that the science, trademark TM is talked about in our culture a lot these days, and our media likes to use that word as if it's like a nomenclature for something actually meaningful. But science says,
mhm,
psychology has known for years and years that children viewing nude photographs, sexually explicit photographs, can actually have the same impact as if they're actually molested. It can have that same sort of trauma stamp on children.
right,
And so, this idea that now we're having schools advocating for adding, um, you know conversations with children in elementary school, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, about gender and sexuality. I wonder if they are just like, do they not know that these studies exist that show that this is traumatizing to children? I try to understand why they believe these conversations are so important to have with young people.
well, one of the things, and I've been very adamant about this throughout my campaign, is when people say we need to trust the experts and listen to what people say. My thing is what experts are we talking about? Are you only referring to
Mm,
experts that agree with your line of thinking and your point of
mm,
view? Or are you getting different experts on different sides of the aisle here, and
yeah,
then bringing everybody into the fold to have these types of conversations? That's a
yeah,
big point, right?
yeah,
So it's a difference when you say, okay, I've collectively listened to this expert that thinks this way, and I've listened to this expert that thinks this way, as opposed to, and now we have this in place. This is what we're going to do, as opposed to, well, this is kind of what we want to do. So what do the experts that think along the lines of our thinking Let's see
Yeah.
what they have to say, and let's just run with this thing.
Yeah.
Right. No, I don't know. And like I said, I'm not gonna back down from that. There are things that I'm like in school, and also too, a good point Erica to bring up is what about parents?
Yeah.
So if you have a book in a library, or you're teaching this stuff in class and in school, and now we're seeing, I mean, I've been asked questions about what I think with regards to certain material from for K through 12, and I'm like, whoa, hold on a second. Kindergarten? No. So are you going to when are you going to bring parents into the fold and let them know not only what you're teaching, but how you're teaching it?
Right.
And that's K through 12 for me. It doesn't matter. There are obviously certain things and different conversations that you're going to have with someone as they grow older, and things like that. But when we're talking about kids, I mean, kindergarten, first grade, second grade, it's like, come on.
I mean, kids at that age don't even understand sex or sexuality unless they've been molested somehow, whether it be through images or physically. So, this idea that you would be talking to a 6-year-old about their sexuality is so strange to me.
Right,
Um, like on what in what possible context would a teacher ever have a reason to talk about the genitalia of one of their students or their I mean, they certainly shouldn't be having sex when they're 6, and if they are, that is a whole other set of problems that we need to be dealing with. Okay, but
right,
like it is very odd to me, and yet if we ask these questions and we point out very obvious truths about childhood and protecting children, we're called every istophobe there is in the book.
right. Oh, I know. I've experienced that lately, but that's just, if I'm that because I you know, am asking harder questions, and bringing
Mm,
things into the fold that I don't hear getting discussed, then
yep.
so be it.
Yep.
But I really think, not even I think, I firmly believe that a lot of parents might not even be aware of what's going on.
Mm.
And
Oh
maybe
yeah.
some are and they're okay with it, and some aren't. But for me, you mentioned earlier walking around, you have parents that don't know what's really going on.
Yep, they're not
And
watching the
it's not
news, they're not
because
on Facebook, they're not.
right, right. And it's not because they're not involved in their kids' education. That's not why they don't know what's going on. And this is why transparency for me is one of the things on my platform, is this: let's just be transparent, because
Mm,
at the end of the day, if you're transparent, you're going to help build trust.
yes.
And at least, this is my thing, lay it out there. And if some parents are cool with it and some are like not, at least you can say you laid it out for them.
I like that. Speaking of your website, let's poke around a little bit here. Let's share this guy. Do do do. Here's your website. This is what I love this. First of all, I love this picture. This made me so happy when I saw this. There's something about that, like the 70s kind of look, the 80s look with the glasses and everything.
Yes,
I'm like, oh my God, this is such an adorable little picture.
right. Yes.
Um,
Yeah. Yep.
I love that. It's your grandfather.
Yeah.
Okay, and you have a dog. His name is Prince, I'm assuming,
Yeah.
because it's
Yes.
Prince. Now, was that named after the artist formerly known as Prince?
No, that's just, he just, when you meet him and you see how he walks and everything, it's fitting. He
Yeah.
prances like a horse, and I never taught him that. So yeah, yeah. So
Oh, I love it. I love it. Okay. So let's see. Goals. You do photography
I'm
as a
picking it up.
hobby?
My mom's a professional photographer, so I haven't had a lot of time lately. Photography is it really, really, once you start and you get into it, you have a lot of respect for people that have been doing it for years.
Hmm.
Not only is it very, it can be very challenging, lighting and learning all of these different nuances of photography, but it's also an expensive hobby
Oh, yes.
because cameras and photography equipment, it is not cheap.
Well, you're
Good stuff
lucky.
wasn't anyway, right?
Well, and that's as long as you're not using film. If when you back in the day when it was film, it was even worse.
Oh,
Um, but yeah, once you get into oh, I need this lens for this and this lens for that, and
definitely.
oh, you can make it do this.
Mhm.
Okay, so your goals for being on school board represent. Say a little bit more about this one.
Represent diverse thinking and provide the school community with a unique perspective that reduces the hyper focusing on racial diversity and instead encourages cognitive diversity. Cognitive diversity is it's something that I would say is more trending now, but it's been around for years.
Mm,
It's just involving, I mean, bringing people with different thought processes
yeah.
and also bringing people that may not think exactly like you do with regards to certain topics and building your team in that
Mm,
way. Because what ends up happening is it's shown throughout history to include in certain societies, those organizations and those societies that did not embrace cognitive diversity, they fail.
mm,
You can even look at the Roman Empire and look at history, and we always hear, Rome fell, but yeah, it was other reasons why uh, they failed to include some mistakes that they made with regards to their infrastructure and the plumbing system and all types of stuff, and not bringing in somebody and thinking, hey, okay, we got to figure it out. We don't need anybody with a different perspective here. We're not going to listen to that guy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. We've been doing this for years, so we'll be fine. And nope,
sound
not
like
necessarily
any
the case.
other municipality around here?
Yes, yes.
Anyone? Anyone?
It's
You think?
yeah. I mean, look, it is what it is, and it's not to do that to create a lot of arguing and strife, but I've learned a lot from people that didn't think like me, and I could
Yeah.
apply these lessons to my life.
Yeah.
So, but what it does is cognitive diversity. It has the ability, and it shows, this is statistically proven, that organizations who are more cognitively diverse, they last longer, they can forecast problems, they solve problems a lot better, and and good things. Now, that's not to say that some things don't come with a challenge, because if you've never done it or embraced it, then
Right.
it's just how it is. But we actually do it. I'm not going to get too in detail, but we build things like that in the military.
Well, and this is what what I tell people, and this is even in my accounting practice. So even like distilling it down into even smaller level, I tell my clients that they should have someone else do their bookkeeping than someone who does their taxes, than someone necessarily who does their payroll and things like that, because people have blind spots, right? So especially, I have I've been doing accounting for 25 years, but that doesn't mean I know everything. There's so much to learn. There's tons of different software applications that you can use. There's even not even one right answer for most questions. There's usually just one answer that's better for your particular situation. And
Mhm.
so when we're talking about business, you have to be able to look at that stuff and go, does this work? Is this reality? Is what I did effective? What is the downstream effect? I want to look back at the decisions I've made and go, am I having the return on investment that I expected for this work that I'm doing?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and but like, I love clients that have, their tax accountant review my work before they do any taxes or anything, because then I go, oh, I didn't see that. Oh, I missed that, right? We need that. We need multiple sets of eyes on things.
We do, and it's important. Like this group think and these homogenous lines of thinking,
Mm,
it's not good. It might make us feel good and feed our egos, but it's not good for the long haul. And for other people that your decisions are going to impact and affect, not only now, but for generations to come, it's
yeah.
not good. It's not good. And that's been proven over time. Historically, the data, I mean, it's there. The
Yeah.
information there. And I have a link actually on my
Science.
website. You can see it. I have a link on
Cool.
my website where you can actually, a Forbes article that was written about how, diversity, equity, and inclusion programs that lack cognitive diversity, they fail. They have a history of failing.
Oh, this is awesome. Yeah. So it's a link right on your website. So
Yes.
under represent, click on the
Yeah.
blue cognitive diversity.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to skip around a little bit because we've got some questions. So Joe says, what is the main concern of parents you've been speaking to for change on the school board? So what is it that most of the parents or taxpayers you're talking to, what are they talking about?
Yes. How you doing, Joe? One of the main concerns is it's interesting. Like I haven't really heard the common theme that I have heard is um, a lot of parents aren't necessarily comfortable with what's being taught,
Mm,
and they want the focus to be more on academics
yeah,
and their children getting things in school that not only they're going to be able to learn in school and apply while they're in school, but also when they get out.
yeah,
Because we have children that aren't going to go to a 4-year school. They don't want to. That's not their thing.
yeah. And I think
So
that
they'll
it's
learn a trade. Go
and
ahead.
it's so irresponsible too. We're saddling these kids with tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt for a promise that isn't true. Oh, if you go get some random degree, no matter what it is, you'll make more money. And the reality is it's not true. A
Right.
lot of degrees actually you can't make back what you got loaned.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean it happens a lot, and that's we could definitely get deeper into that conversation, but and it's
Yeah.
just for me it's transparency. When I'm walking around and we're having conversations and parents aren't aware of certain things and they're asking me questions, I'm like, you should know that. I think that's something you should know. You should be telling me about that, not the or bringing something to my attention, not the other way around. So,
Yeah.
and look, you know, I understand parents get busy, they have lives and stuff,
Yes.
right? But my thing is look, let's bring them into the fold. And I've always said this: I don't want parents to. I'm not saying they have to control the curriculum altogether, but just bring them in the know, and
Yeah.
don't bring them in the know when the kid comes home and, hey, I learned this today, and they're like, huh? They should have already known about this
Yeah.
before,
Well,
especially when we get into more of these sensitive topics like you were mentioning earlier.
right.
So
And so as a parent, I would rather you be teaching, right? Like we started this conversation with is math, reading, writing, the things that are useful, things that they'll use when they graduate from high school, maybe like civics classes or like taxes 101 or like how to balance your checkbook or something.
I firmly believe, and I have said it
Home ec.
time and time again, personal finance, financial literacy should be mandatory requirement for kids graduating high school. I don't even think it should be
Yes.
an option. Now you have optional classes, but why not make it mandatory?
Yeah.
You have kids in high school that are working, they're going to have to do taxes. I mean,
You're
why not?
you're trying to push debt on them before they even have a credit score.
Make it mandatory so that they can understand certain things. That's
I
all.
would love that. I think Dan Feliciano is putting together something like that, isn't he? Do you know who that is? Some
I I've met him maybe once or twice. The name sounds familiar, but I've never had an extended conversation.
Yeah. Any of our viewers that are watching now, I'm trying to remember. I know he was putting together some kind of like a school thing. But maybe I'm mixing up stories. I'm gonna have to give him a call after this week and see how the heck he's doing with stuff. Because especially for somebody like me who went to school for accounting, there's so much stuff that I realize that I know that none of my cohorts know, that nobody understands. There's
Mhm.
things that I've learned over the course of time about credit and credit scores and liabilities and whatever it is that many people just have zero understanding of. And we
Right.
just go forth and figure it out.
Actually, that leads me into something, and I just want to say this real quick, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I talk about improving, student math, science, and technology skills through an exploration of real world problems and solutions. The
Mm,
STEM Academy in this district, they have these programs, and they do actively work and engage these kids in programs,
good.
to experience some of these real world problems and solutions. But there's also other things that I'm like, look, let's make it even more interesting, right?
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, the accounting piece and
Yep.
this type of thing, and really understanding debt and how there's good debt and there's bad debt, liabilities, assets, right? Like get into the weeds. And because we live in such a reactive society, but even now with social media being so wild, a lot of these kids, they spend a lot of time on social media, like this Instagram, and they see these people's lives and how they're living. And it's like, okay, that's a car, but that's going to depreciate in value, and just understanding some of these basic things and really,
Yes.
really engaging these kids in this. I think so I'm not saying that the program is completely faulted. I'm just like, look, maybe there's some other things we can actually add in to have more
Yeah.
engagement.
I mean, yeah, like maybe let's not talk to 6-year-olds about sex. Let's maybe talk to high school kids about vocation and other things like that. Like maybe that's how we adjust our priorities. Okay, so Rogers asked, "What is your position on the state of Vermont mandating Common Core in all schools?" And he says, thank you,
Yeah,
Juan.
so I'm not, I've heard of Common Core. I've heard that a lot of people don't like it because a lot of parents, they have trouble helping their kids with homework because that's not how they were taught math, for example.
Yeah,
So um, I've also heard some things with regards to the proficiency based grading an assessment system that we have in place now in some schools. So I don't, with Common Core, I'll be honest with you, Roger, I'm not an expert on Common Core, but I've heard more bad than good that pertains to it, but more so with math, especially. So
yeah. So Roger, just for clarification, if you can type another chat, do you mean like the stuff that we hear about, like teaching to the test, how teachers aren't really getting to teach different lessons, that it's all because everything is revolved around these standardized testing? I wonder if that's what the question really means. Because I agree with you, Juan. I've heard nothing but bad things from teachers and parents and students about this emphasis on focusing everything on teaching to the tests from the federal Department of Education.
right, right. And I'm gonna say this too. Uh, we have some really, really good teachers in
Yeah.
this district. And I've had the opportunity to speak with some and to hear certain concerns. So it's not,
Mhm.
so when we talk about parents and kids and things like that, I don't want to forget, and even running for school board, I don't want us to forget about the teachers because
Yeah.
they're in this fight with us as well. So
And they are also feeling overwhelmed and really disheartened by a lot of the stuff that's going on. There are a lot of teachers who are not okay with some of the edicts coming down from whether it's the federal Department of Education or the Vermont Department of Education. It's not like every teacher is out there being like rah rah sis boom bah with a lot of these topics. Many of us agree are distracting from
mhm,
quality education.
mhm,
Sometimes I think there's a tendency for those of us, I'll say, for technically the school board is a nonpartisan thing, but I'll say for those of us that are conservative leaning or right of center, we hear about these salacious and horrific things being taught in our school, and then we go, oh my god, it's everyone. It must be every administrator, it must be every teacher, it must be everyone, every worker in the school that wants to teach these terrible things to my kid. And it's like, no, a lot of people are stuck
Yeah,
right?
that is, and I know for a fact that is not true.
Yeah.
That is absolutely not true. But that's how um, anybody that's listening here, anybody that has a background in psychology, they understand what jamming is and
Mm,
psychological jamming is. So I'm not going to get too deep into that, but that's a term I want people to look up tonight: psychological jamming, and then not only look it up, but look at how it applies to a lot of what goes on right now in this society. So
okay. I'm Googling that right now. I'll look at it after.
yeah,
Cultural jamming? Culture jamming?
because
Mm,
psychological.
oh, I
See
see
it?
it. Okay. I saw
What,
okay, I'm
what
finding
is
it
it?
now.
What does it say? Real the definition. What does
The
it?
creation of images or practices that force viewers to question the status quo.
Boom.
Hmm. Disrupt social norms. Okay. All right. Okay. So everybody needs to go look into this on their own. Roger says Common Core curriculum in all aspects in all aspects is interwoven into the schools. A number of states are removing Common Core after seeing its total failure. Yeah, I think this is related to. I think this is related to the federal Department of Education stuff. I
Right.
think.
So here's what I want to ask Roger real quick, just to pose the question back, because I'm like I said, I don't have all the answers. I'm not an expert, but one thing about me is if I don't know the answer to something, I'll say, look, I'll go do the research and get back to you. I don't try to
Yeah.
sit and act like I know. Now, did they finally decide to ban it after all these years of watching it fail? Or
Mm,
like, because this is my thing, right? With this stuff. How did it take this long?
yeah.
I mean, I've heard people complain about this for years.
Yeah.
So why are we finally here? What was the final straw, you know?
Mm,
So
that's a really good question because you're right. I've literally been hearing from teachers that the No Child Left Behind Act left every child behind,
mhm,
basically. And so, and I mean, God, Bush was president 400 years ago, for God's sake. So why are we still, why does it take this long for people to start acknowledging that something is not working?
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, you'd think 20 years on, we would have been able to say, meh, meh, not working.
yeah. And all these kids have gone through, and now what? You know?
Yeah.
So
Well,
yeah.
and that's what, that's a good transition into this. I want everybody to know there's a lot on his website. So there is a lot on your website. Everyone should visit Coleman for EssexJunction.org, Coleman for EssexJunction.org. The link is in the description. And look at all this. But I love you've touched on the transparency piece a bunch this evening. And I
Mhm.
just love that this piece require full transparency in how and where tax funding is spent on public education in our community. Transparency and candor are important. Line by line budget shared with the community. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that that we're talking transparency and accountability, right? And I mean, this is for not just the finances and financial stuff. This is for the curriculum, for everything.
And
Um,
yeah, sorry, go
no,
ahead.
no, please go ahead.
It takes some work to do that, but what I will say is I've been speaking with some folks, and a line by line can be requested, and you can get it. But my thing is why request it? Just print out something, if it takes a little bit longer, okay, print out something and then
Yeah,
out to the community, because taxpayers should know exactly where their money's going,
yeah.
have a right to know exactly where it's going. I
Well,
don't, they, there's nothing wrong with that to me.
and I think that there is this adversarial relationship that's been set up between the residents of a community and the school administration, as
Uh-huh.
if somehow we're all just a bunch of boobs and we don't know what's going on and we couldn't possibly understand what's required to run a school or whatever. and oh, we're this, we're this high and mighty, all knowing group of people that, we're the only ones who can decide. And it's like, why do you feel like we're enemies? Like, why does there have to be this adversarial relationship? Can't it just do, does the school board and administration not understand that they are in fact accountable to the taxpayers, that they are our public servants whose salaries we pay?
Right. I believe, I mean, it, look, it depends on what we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
I'm a firm believer, and I've tried to exemplify this and actually be the example throughout this campaign. What I mean by that is I have
Yeah.
continuously put myself in situations where I knew most of the individuals that were questioning me or that I was in the room with didn't agree with me.
Mm.
I did it anyway
Yeah.
because that's what has to happen. But it has to happen. The dialogue has to take place, right?
Yeah. Yep.
But you have to give people more than a minute to talk too.
Yeah.
You see, you see what
Yep.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like there should be like I'm not even kidding, like a week long or something. I don't know, but we could use some cognitive diversity to figure out the best possible way to go about doing this. To literally have the administration and the parents and have them talk to them and literally listen to and hear concerns. I'm not saying everything's going to change, but it brings people together to foster a healthy dialogue. And one of the other beauties of it is when kids see this, maybe that'll be a good example for kids. And they'll actually figure out how to do it. Because one of the things I have seen is this stuff that goes on some of these threads. And I'm like, we wonder where kids get it from. Look at how adults are acting right now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's totally true.
It's asinine. And
Yeah.
and it's hypocrisy as well to think that, okay, well, I can do this to somebody online, but then I want to know how I'm gonna protect the kids from getting bullied online. When online is one of the main ways kids get bullied anyway.
Oh my God. You're so correct. You're so correct.
I mean, but we have to bring people together and literally hear their concerns and quite frankly, leave your ego at the door.
Well, and that's, what I'd almost like to see something like a landmark forum where like everybody can just sit in a room together for a weekend and just deal with the fact that everyone's feelings are going to get hurt and you're going to get mad, but be so committed to the outcome and to your community that you're willing to just work through it together. Do
Exactly.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, and you mentioned feelings, but a wise woman told me, she said, emotion shouldn't drive policy. We can't make rules and regulate based off of how people feel.
It's true. That is very
And
true.
honestly, so when I spoke at the school with regards to the BLM flag, I turned around at the students in the room and I said, the best decisions you're gonna make in this life are gonna probably come from a place of using logic and reasoning. Some of the worst decisions you will make, you will look back and realize I was in a high state of emotion and I probably didn't make the right decision then.
Yep. Oh my God, that is such an accurate statement.
So for me, it's not just about serving on the school. It's about really bringing back some logic and reasoning into this process, especially when we talk about a lot of these sensitive topics.
You are absolutely correct.
And I'm empathetic to people. I'm empathetic. Right here, I said, you know, I want to make sure that every student gets the love, care, and support that they need in these challenging times. But at the same time, our priorities, I'm still going to stick with the
Right.
reading, math, and stuff.
I'm going to put your well-being ahead of your feelings.
Yes.
I care about you so much that I'm willing to make sure you get what you need, even if you don't understand what it is at the moment. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that You
No,
know, it doesn't mean that we don't care about people's feelings or their emotions. It doesn't mean that we're not empathetic, but sometimes, you know, my husband will tell you for sure that there are plenty of times where he has to disregard my feelings and just make a better decision for us.
mhm, mhm.
Because, you know, when we get all up in our emotions, we don't act in our own best interest.
No, we don't. And there's a quote, one of my favorite quotes, but the end of it is, it says, if we treat people as they are, we make them worse.
Oh,
If we treat people as they ought to be, we help them become what they are capable of becoming.
oh,
But
I
that
love
first
that.
part again, if we treat people as they are, we make them worse.
This is what is it? Again, this is a thing that I learned from an educator. This isn't like new information. People rise and fall to the level of expectation that is put upon them.
Yes.
They're
Yes.
they're either going to be encouraged and lifted up to accomplish great things, or we are going to tell them that they're all victims and they're never going to make it, and everybody's going to keep them down and they're never going to have anything, and then that's going to be their experience of life.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. You have to, like I've said, you can teach stuff in a way that, uh, you know, Caucasians, for example, don't feel guilty for something that a relative may or may not have done 300-400 years ago or 100 years ago. And you can teach it in a way where uh, blacks and others don't feel like victims, and leave that classroom and start operating in a sense of learned helplessness.
This is what Benjamin and I talk about pretty regularly. Is we do want Black history to be taught differently. We do want history to be taught differently. We want people to know that Black people contributed a lot more to this country than being slaves or have Jim Crow happen to them and things like that. Why is it like everything in our history that we focus on is how Black people have been oppressed, not all the ways that they have been able to overcome and make great important contributions and successes and all this stuff in spite of the oppression and being kept down. Like that is the story I want to hear. I want to hear how amazing Black people are for overcoming and succeeding in spite of the nonsense.
And
That's
that
the
right there.
story I want to hear.
Yeah, and that they're beautiful stories. I mean, you have Robert Smalls, you have so many other people who did great things. And this is the thing, though, we can't just teach this stuff during Black History Month. See, that's another thing. I'm not a fan of Black History Month, but I'm not getting into that right now. You got to teach this stuff all the time. Tell
Yes.
it in spite of, and that's what I've said time and time again, is because there were so many people that contributed to this, right? But
Yes.
teaching it, because I don't think a lot of people even realize, even during segregation and these things, how many Black millionaires you had,
Yep.
how many
Yep.
Blacks were actually starting their own businesses and prospering and doing these things. And you're talking like, I mean, this was some rough times, but they did it anyway in spite of. That's the inspiring stuff. That's the motivating stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
And I'm not knocking the accomplishments of Dr. King and Rosa Parks, but there are a lot of other people that we don't typically hear about that deserve some airtime as well. A
That's
lot of
right.
airtime. And Booker T. Washington for me is probably my favorite. I
Man.
love it from Booker T. Washington to come off of that plantation and to start a university. Come on.
What? Forget about it.
To
You
save the
mentioned Robert
university.
You mentioned Robert Smalls. He's the guy who stole the Confederate ship, right?
Stole the Confederate ships, used to sail people up north, and actually ended up running and winning a seat in Congress.
That's right. So Robert Smalls started out as a slave, worked on a Confederate ship, ended up they sent him back for something. And so the crew, it was empty. There was no crew on it. So he and a few other slaves stole the ship, and they knew all the hand signals and the hat signals to get through the channel canals. They picked up his wife and family and a bunch of other slaves. They sailed it all the way to freedom. and then he became a congressperson. I mean, just
I mean, come on, that's
a
amazing, right?
Republican congressperson, for the record.
And then
Just
you
saying.
got William. Then you got, I mean, it's just so many different things, so many different people that contributed and did so much, and women too.
Yeah.
Women too. I'm
Yep.
like, we don't hear about them.
No.
We
No.
gotta
We've all just
incorporate
been,
this stuff.
yes, we've all just been weak, meek, little, and no, like Amelia Earhart. You know, like what for? Oh, Lord. Okay, I could just go on and on about this. Okay, hold on. I'll try not to derail us onto that.
Like, it's cool. I got you. I got you. It's all right.
Okay, hold on. Okay, somebody asked. I'm gonna put the website in the chat here as well for folks. Putting it here. Okay, how far back should we go with history? Back when communities in other countries used to round people up to sell. So that's a good question, Ray. Like, what do we choose out of our history to
So,
teach? Like, how do we pick? Oh, go ahead.
Me personally, talk about everything.
Mm,
But see, this is the thing with history. I go as far back as we possibly can, right?
yeah.
And be accurate. But when we talk about the Civil War and we talk about different groups and demographics of people, right? We
Yeah.
need to talk there. So if we're going to talk about, I'll just say Civil War, right? I'll just go slave trade. If we're
Yeah.
going to talk about slave trade, then we need to talk about the involvement that Native Americans had in the slave trade too. It doesn't get discussed. The
Yeah.
involvement that they had throughout the slave, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
knowledge, it's there, but this stuff just doesn't get talked about. And what happens is we want to point one group out or the other group out. And at the end of the day, when you look at history, there is no race or demographic that is innocent.
Yeah. Yep.
We all had a hand because blacks got here somehow, right? From Africa. And there's still slavery going on in certain parts of the world right now.
In this country, in fact.
So you see what I'm saying? So we'll be so caught up talking about something that happened 500 years ago, and you got stuff going on right now. So you talking about the fact that something wasn't prevented 500 years ago, but you don't even know what's going on right now, that you could actually maybe, I'm not saying you go over there and go gung-ho, but you could take a more active effort in being involved in something going on right now and seeing what you can do to help prevent that.
They're literally humans being trafficked across the Canadian border through Vermont, in fact, for sex slavery primarily. Like, y'all could actually do something about the current people being victimized.
I mean, so
call me crazy.
No, but let's talk about history. But let's talk about everything.
Yeah.
Stop picking and choose. And this is the interesting thing with history. It's so easy to take it and manipulate it and pick and choose what you want to do. So if we're going to talk about the Civil War, we don't want to talk about, we want to start at the Civil War and work our way forward, right?
Yeah.
We want to talk, when people teach about World War II and Nazi Germany and all that, it's like y'all need to get a little bit more in depth with how people rose to power and what they did,
what was happening, what was going on in the culture, what was
get in depth with it.
Yes.
That's all I'm saying, right? So I'm not opposed to teaching history because it's a part of it is ugly, but it's also beautiful. Because when a black man can sit on a live Facebook call with a white woman and have a conversation, we've come a long way, people. We've come a long way. I mean,
that is actually a really, really apt observation, Juan, when you think about it. Like, if the fact that, 50, 60 years ago, if you and I were walking down the street, we would, especially depending on where you were in this country, we wouldn't be allowed to talk to each other. Like, that wouldn't be okay. That would be seen as some kind of a moral whatever. Like, we're not there anymore.
And these kids, they go to school. They don't think about this stuff. These babies, they innocent. They just love each other. Like, why do we, yeah.
Yep. Oh my goodness. Okay. So hold on. Let's see. Ray says, grew up in Essex. I hope you win. Roger said, as a lifelong Vermonter, he fully supports you. We need your common sense and strong leadership in our schools.
Thank you, Roger.
I am totally in agreement. Jim says, Juan just nailed it, but I didn't. Jim, you got to forgive me. I wasn't paying attention to when you messaged this, but you nailed something.
Jim, I appreciate you, man.
I love it. That's super funny. Let me see. New comments. Here we go. All right. And Ray said he agrees completely. I'm guessing we're talking about how we're covering history. Okay. So I want to know so we're just about running out of time here, Juan. So I want to make sure that you have a couple minutes to, give your closing pitch to the audience. First of all, make sure election day is this week, right?
It's April 12th. Yes.
Oh my God, it's Tuesday.
Right.
Okay.
So for the town, those voting in the town, that vote will take place at the middle school. And then for myself, that vote for the village will take place at Essex High School. Yeah, that's as far as the vote goes, April 12th. And if you don't have a ballot, contact the town clerk's office and see what you can do. And don't hesitate to show up in person. I mean, I as I've been walking around and I've gotten a lot of emails and texts and phone calls, and I'm very blessed and fortunate to have that. But if people don't go vote, if people don't go vote, actions speak louder than words. Words mean something now, but you got to get out there and vote.
Okay, look at everyone watching. Look at my face. Vote. 50% of Vermonters don't vote, even when they get a ballot mailed to their house. Seriously, people, you need to actually vote. I'm doing the creepy Joe Biden thing. Sorry. In all seriousness, you guys need to get out there and vote. For real. I don't care how bad the weather is. I don't care if it's snowing. I don't care if you have to walk both ways uphill for miles. If you say that you care about what's going on and you say that this stuff matters and that representation matters, then it's your responsibility. Juan's out there taking the hits for you guys. Juan's out there saying he'll take the time to show up to these meetings and have conversations and get called names online and do all this other crap. Y'all, all you have to do is show up and vote. Okay, I'm done lecturing everyone. Okay, back to Juan giving his pitch here, his final pitch.
No, for me, nothing, too in depth. I just, throughout this whole process, I've definitely learned, and I'm going to try to say this without I get too emotional, but I've learned a lot about myself. And I want to thank everybody for praying for me and for the support that they've given me, because, being a strong man, sometimes I don't care how strong you are, you need people to help lift you up. And
that's right.
Some of those people have been Black, they've been white, they've been from different walks of life. So it really doesn't matter when you're in that arena, So the individuals that have been in that arena with me and willing to stand in there with me and take some of these blows as well, I will never forget that. And I'm actually very, very humbled. And how can I not believe in God and Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior when everything that I've been through and I'm still standing. So to me, to y'all, thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing y'all at the polls and getting on that school board and helping to make a difference in this community. So thank you.
Amen. Praise Jesus. I love it. And Juan, I look forward so much to getting to know you more and about your past and your upbringing. I can tell from looking at the pictures and reading the stories that there is a lot of depth and a lot of experience there that you have to share with the young people of Essex Junction, with your community, and with Vermont. And we are so looking forward to seeing your name on top of the winners list on Tuesday. and keeping up with you and seeing what you have going on. So
Yeah.
hang on here with me. I'm gonna end the live broadcast. And thank you everyone for being with us tonight. Thank you for showing up and taking your time to be here with us.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate y'all showing up.
Yeah.